Hello one more time to Literature for All. Let's get it started. Welcome to today's episode, where we will be delving into two of the most striking poetic voices in American literature. T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of Alfred Prufrock and Emily Dickinson's I'm Nobody, Who Are You? I'm here with Isabel, who's been researching these poems through the lens of identity, alienation, and time. Welcome!
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. These two poems are so different in tone and form, but they reveal a lot when put it into dialogue.
Let's dive right in. Both poems seem to deal with alienation, but in very different ways. How would you describe the kind of alienation Prufrock experiences?
Prufrock's alienation is deeply internal and paralyzing. He's consumed by self-doubt, social anxiety, and fear of judgment that leaves him unable to act. Eliot's use of stream of consciousness reveals a man who overthinks every potential interaction. He's trapped in an endless speculation, we can say. That line, there will be time, becomes an excuse for inaction, showing how time itself turns into a barrier.
Right, and that phrase repeats like a mantra. It's almost as if he's trying to smooth himself but ends up reinforcing his paralysis.
Yes, exactly. And the setting, a fragmented modern city, only heightens his feelings of isolation. He imagines women talking about Michelangelo, and he's not a part of that world. He sees himself as outside of it, an observer, never a participant of it.
And Eliot is writing half a century later, in a very different world.
Exactly. Eliot's Prufrock was published in 1915, right in the middle of the World War I, though it was written a few years earlier. But even before the war, society was going through massive change. Urbanization, technological advancement, the decline of traditional faith system. There was a general sense of cultural disorientation. People were moving from small communities to impersonal cities. That modern environment fits Prufrock's anxiety. His one voice in a crowded, indifferent world.
And that kind of modern alienation is more psychological than social, right?
Right. For Eliot, the fragmentation is internal. Prufrock is not just lonely, he's unsure of how to be self at all. There's no stable identity to hold onto. The modern subject, as seen in early modernist literature, become defined by doubt, introspections, and paralysis. Eliot draws on that new sense of alienation and a structural problem. There's too much choice, too much noise, too little meaning.
Whereas Dickinson's world was quieter, but more constraining.
Exactly. She's responding to confinement, Eliot to fragmentation. Dickinson's speaker breaks out by turning inward. Eliot's speaker gets lost in the inward spiral. Their perspective, historical moments shape those responses. Dickinson turns privacy into power. Eliot turns public performance into a kind of existential crisis.
That's a fascinating contrast. It reminds us that alienation isn't just a personal feeling, it's also shaped by history.
Definitely. The poems reflect different pressures. As we said before, Dickinson's social conformity, especially for women. Eliot's is modern disillusionment. The sense that the self no longer has a clear center. Reading them together, you see a kind of evolution in the American poetic self, from rejection to the crowd to a crisis of coherence.
Some critics even suggest that Prufrock is talking to himself in the poem, don't they?
Yes, and that interpretation really enriches the analysis. La Fuente argued that the you in Let Us Go Then, You and I, might be another side of Prufrock, a sort of inner dialogue. The passionate self says, let's go, but the timid self hesitates. That fragmentation of the self makes it a dramatic monologue in a very modern sense.
That's a great contrast to Dickinson's poem, where the speaker embraces alienation as something positive. Would you say her nobody voice is the opposite of Prufrock?
Well, in many ways, yes. Dickinson's speaker chooses to be nobody, and she invites someone else to join her. She's not afraid of being invisible, she prefers it. Instead of isolation bringing anxiety, it brings empowerment. She says, let's reject the crowd together.
I find that line, are you nobody too, surprisingly warm and conspirational. She's not alone. She's creating a small private alliance.
That's what makes it so powerful. Unlike Prufrock, who longs for connection but can't risk exposure. Dickinson's speaker connects through shared rejection of norms. She's confident and even playful. Her alienation isn't imposed, it's chosen.
So both poems use alienation, but Eliot presents it as something painful and paralyzing, while Dickinson turns it into a kind of strength?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Eliot's style, with its broken rhythms, lack of structure, and sudden shifts, mirror Prufrock's mental chaos. Dickinson's short lines, dashes, and compressed form reflect her clarity. She is concise, but she says so much with so little.
Speaking of style, how do their poetic techniques shape the meaning of alienation and identity?
Eliot uses a stream of consciousness and free verse to externalize Prufrock's fragmented inner life. His indecision is mirrored in the rhythm. Sentences start and stop, rhyme schemes appear and disappear. According to La Fuente and also Kahn and Bradward, this irregularity reinforces how Prufrock's mind works. Anxious, self-interrupting, directionless.
And Dickinson?
Well, Dickinson, she's minimalist but sharp. Her dashes fragment the line, but in a controlled way. Her rhyme is often slant or unexpected, but it's deliberate. The poem feels intimate, like a secret note passed between two outsiders. That tone makes her voice sound more firm, like she's chosen this role as nobody and takes pride in it.
There's a quote from a recent article by Safdar and Sadina where they say that Dickinson's poem functions as contradictory statement about identity. Do you agree?
Yes, calling oneself nobody sounds negative at first, but she reclaims the term. It's subversive. She rejects the idea that social visibility equals worth. Instead, she implies that anonymity might be where true identity lies, unpressured, unobserved, free-form performance.
That brings us back to the questions of performance, which is so important in Eliot. Prufrock is terrified of performing himself in public. Do you think Eliot's poem is partly a critique of modern pressures?
Very much so. The repeated image of women discussing Michelangelo or the line, "Do I dare disturb the universe?" all point to the overwhelming expectation Prufrock feels. He can't even ask a question because he fears it. will be too disruptive. In modern society, his reduces to an anxious echo.
And yet, some critics have suggested Prufrock might reflect Eliot himself. Do you think that's fair?
It's tempting to read autobiographically, especially given Eliot's own social anxieties and the emotional turmoil he faced in the early 19th. But Eliot also warned against confusing the speaker with the poet. Prufrock is more of a mask, an exploration of a fragmented modern identity. He's Eliot's alter ego, not his mirror.
That's a good distinction. Now let's touch on time more directly. Eliot makes time oppressive. Prufrock keeps saying there will be time, but never acts. How is time treated in Dickinson's?
Well, Dickinson almost ignores time. Her speaker doesn't fear it. There's no urgency. Instead of seeing time as a threat or a deadline for decision making, she seems to live outside of it. She is detached from the need to conform to society's timeline or standards.
Which is radical in its own way, right?
Absolutely. Dickinson's refusal to play by society's rule, including its time structure, makes her alienation more liberating. She's not delayed or stuck like Prufrock. She's opt out.
That difference is the perception of time really shapes the identity of the speaker in both poems. One is anxious about wasting time. The other redefines what matters entirely.
Exactly. Prufrock measures life in coffee spoons. With Sayed's, he sees time as fragmented, repetitive, even meaningless. However, Dickinson doesn't need to measure anything. She just is.
And that relates to their use of irony too, doesn't it? Prufrock's voice is melancholic and ironic, even tragic. Dickinson's irony feels sharper, more controlled.
Yes, her irony empowers. When she mocks the dreary public life in How Public, Like a Frog, to tell one name, the livelong John, she ridicules the desire for social recognition. Her speaker laughs at what others chase.
Whereas Prufrock can't even decide whether to speak at all.
That's the heartbreaking part. He imagines rejection before he's even taking a step. His alienation silences him. Hers give her a voice.
That's a perfect summary. One last question. What do you think we learn about identity by reading these poems side by side?
That identity is not fixed. It's shaped by our relationship with society, with time, with self-image. Eliot shows what happens when anxiety and social pressure fragment the self. Alienation becomes a prison. Dickinson shows how rejecting those norms can create a space for a freer self. Both voices are poetic masks, but they several deep truths about modern subjectivity.
What a rich discussion! Thank you so much for your thoughtful insights and for helping us see how two poems, written decades apart, still speak so powerfully to our inner lives today.
Thank you, it was a pleasure to explore them.
Goodbye!